Hey there, this is the Intelligentsia Podcast. I'm Nick Zager,
And I'm Remy Daner.
and today we have Darin Sitto from Dental ROI and Associates. How's it going, Darin?
Doing well, Nick. How are you?
We're doing great. It's exciting to have you on here. Your company specializes in helping dentists from the accounting side, and so we want to learn more about you and how you help dentists. Our really our goal here with this podcast is to help our audience who are dentists of different places in their career, whether it's early stage, mid stage, or late stage. We want to kind of give them some good actionable items, some tools that they can use to help make some better business decisions going forward.
Sounds good. No, thank you for having me on.
Awesome. So how did you end up specializing in dental accounting?
It's a good question. So my brother and I got into this space a few years ago. Our founding partner, Greg Davis, has been in this space for a really long time, and we had an opportunity to join the practice a couple of years ago. And so we did. My brother had a separate CPA firm specializing in healthcare. As we see a lot of different professions sort of, narrowing into a type of specialty, we essentially decided to do the same thing. And we really enjoy working with dentists and dental practices and really enjoy their business model. So we're specializing to, offer very niche services, CPA specific services to dentists and dental groups.
Yeah, we're to piggyback on Nick's enthusiasm having you on. I mentioned before, we've had a number of people on where they're newer relationships, and that's exciting for us, of course. But we've had the privilege and pleasure of working with you for a while now on various projects. And I know for my part, Nick and I can structure a fantastic real estate opportunity, whether it's a lease or a purchase for our clients. But we have no sense of what the cash flow is going to be like and what the impact of the decisions we're making now are going to have on the practice in 6 months or a year or 5 years and beyond. And so for my part, having somebody like you involved in a project provides peace of mind, because if we okay it and you okay it, it's a green light for a project in most cases. So can you talk about how, from an accountant's perspective, how do you navigate both the acquisition process and a startup or a de novo expansion relocation project?
Yeah, no, thanks, Remy. I think that's a really good point. I think, the idea of developing a good professional team, right? So having somebody, on the real estate side, i.e. you guys, a good attorney, a good CPA advisor, and obviously, from the lending standpoint and having access to the capital to be able to do, what the client wants to essentially do, is crucial to the success of, finding the right deal and obviously executing on that deal. So from the accounting side, from the CPA, the advisory side, we really like to get to understand the goals of the client, right? So what are the goals, whether that be a startup, whether that be, a practice acquisition or entering into a new lease, figuring out really what the short-term goals are, I think are important, but also what the long-term goals are, right? Because, a lot of these have short-term and long-term impacts, and where does the client see themselves short-term versus long-term is very important for us to consider, in analyzing a type of transaction. So, putting together projections out 3 to 5 years, important. Long-term projections up to 10 years is important, right? Is the project going to cash flow? What are, immediate costs and expenses? What are future costs and expenses? Is there a phase 1 and a phase 2? Is there a second type of expansion that might need to happen that'll require some capital? Making sure that, the project is going to be generating, the appropriate cash flow, obviously from a debt service standpoint, but also for the client, right? And is it in line with the client's expectations of their ROI, right? So a lot of people ask us all the time, we're Dental ROI Associates. So what does ROI stand for? It's return on investment, right? Anything, that you get involved in, whether that be real estate or an operational business or a dental practice, the goal is for it to generate income, right? And how fast is it going to generate that income to cover the capital expenditure that you're either a loan or the amount of capital that you're putting into the project to see a return on that money.
To that end, can you share any success stories? We don't need personal details, but some nice, some nice anecdotes about how you guys, how you guys have really knocked it out of the park for some of your clients.
Yeah. So, we do a lot on the, so outside of your typical CPA services, the tax compliance, tax returns, bookkeeping, accounting, and all that, which we could probably get into later. But, we do a lot on the buy and sell side advisory work, right? So putting together, we have a client right now, out of Nashville, Tennessee. We're helping them right now open up their second location. So, they basically, they did a startup, and, spent a ton of money on marketing. They're in their third or fourth year now, and they're basically at overflow capacity. So right now we're working with the banks to get loans for, their second practice location. That's a startup story. Obviously we're helping with the underwriting for the bank, right? So putting together the business plan, putting together the projections for the second location, obviously having helped them, the first go around, at a startup, that's, CapEx, where's the money going to go? How much is the lease going to run the client, all of that good information. On the acquisition side, so we have a number of associates that, we help through the buy side, helping them, vet certain deals, of practice acquisition or building acquisition. Obviously with your guys' help in those times and helping with comps and valuations on real estate, things like that, but really helping a client vet a practice, putting together cash flow projections for them. What's that service going to look like, and then working on the purchase price allocation, and things like that. We have numerous clients, across the state, across the country, who we help through this process. We have a really good success story on the west side of the state. Doctor bought a practice from a retiring doctor as a specialty practice. The doctor's about a year and a half in and doing numbers, blowing the projections out of the water. So, our job is to put together conservative projections for clients so that they have a realistic idea of what's going on. But, different than a lot of CPAs, we're advisors in the sense that we're going to help our clients grow, right? And we're gonna help push them to grow and try to implement things to get them to grow their practices. So, this doctor is, only in year 2, but I see and foresee some type of expansion down the road. Numerous stories like that
I love that both those stories, especially the first one, because you think based on your timeline, that was 3 to 4 years ago. This is a COVID baby, right? So, if you will. So can you imagine, it's hard to imagine somebody opening up a business, especially a dental business, in the beginning of COVID and how scary it must have been. And then to think that just 3 to 4 years later, they're opening up a second location, is with your help is wild. It's wild. So we get asked all the time, why a dental specific or why a healthcare specific real estate broker compared to a generalist? And so I'm going to put that out. We have our answer, and it's probably not much different from yours, but we get asked that all the time when it comes time for us to make an introduction to you. And so I think your answer is going to be better than mine. So go ahead and address that. Why dental ROI over a general accountant?
Right. So, I mean, Remy, it's a good question. We get that question, all the time as well.
Sure.
And I think in a world that's getting overly complex, right? And all facets and aspects, just like there's special attorneys, right? So if you get in a car accident, God forbid, and you need to make a claim or you're going to sue somebody, you're not gonna pick a general attorney, right? Or attorney that does contract law, or somebody you're gonna hire to go and, buy a business. You're gonna hire an auto attorney, right? In different professions, around the world, in a more complex world, people are starting to specialize, right? Just as dentists, for example, right? You're going to go see your GP doctor. Say you need a root canal, maybe they're going to refer you to an endodontist, right? Or you have some gum problems, and they're going to, send you to a periodontist. Or you need your kid's wisdom teeth pulled, you're going to go see an oral surgeon. Or you have kids, maybe you're not going to take them to your GP doctor, you're going to take them to your pediatric doctor. Same with, other doctors, right? There's cardiologists, right? There's OBs, there's, you name it. There's different specialties in various professions, around the world. Same in the CPA world, right? There's CPAs that specialize in industries. And I think, if you look at any CPA firm's pages, or websites, they're going to tell you what industries they specialize in, because they're going to know how that business is ranked, right? So from a dental specific CPA side, we're kept abreast of what's going on in the industry, what's going on in the markets. We have tons of different relationships with different vendors, right? And different, support vendors within the field that we work with, that we would be able to recommend. There's tax specific, planning that goes along with a dental practice, right? There's, on the valuation side, how are dental practices valued, how to put together projections for a startup. We obviously know all of these different things, and we're able to help our clients through those different things. As markets change, as the structure of dentistry changes a little bit, or a shift, right? The whole DSO model, that's became really, really big in the last 10 to 15 years, right? So, as the industry sort of gets narrowed, sort of the supporting system around it, and the value that we're able to provide, I think there's different KPIs that need to be measured for a dental practice versus a different type of business. There's ways you want to be able to have your financial reporting to be able to slice and dice data, whether that's, your own metrics and how you're assessing the financial health of the practice, versus maybe preparing yourself for a sale, or, sending underwriting to a bank, or whatever that might be. We understand dentistry, we understand the business, and we understand the insurance-based business around dentistry, right? So we understand productions, we understand collections, we understand the types of procedures, how those procedures get billed out, how they get reimbursed, how the cash, basically the cash flow comes in and out of the practices. Where should the numbers be? Where should, how much should my associate be producing? How much should my associate get paid? Where should my hygiene wages? What mix of doctor production versus hygiene production, right? So being able to understand those concepts, and then obviously being able to consult and advise a client one way or another, I think is invaluable to a client. And not to mention, a lot of our clients are dealing with the same issues, right? And we're brainstorming with the people within our network to figure out how to best solve those issues.
Yeah, when you have 1,000 or more clients in the same industry, you can see probably a little bit easier when certain metrics are a little bit out of whack, or where they should be focusing, or what needs to be adjusted potentially. And so that's, it's a good benefit of being a specialist and understanding some of these concepts. I mean, that's huge. Talk to us about some of the red flags.
I want to piggyback on that real quick too. So yeah, that's a really good point. So what we're able to do is we're able to benchmark practices, right, of similar size, of similar geographic location, of similar specialty to others, right? And what are others doing well versus maybe what a certain client may not be doing well. That is invaluable to the amount of data that I guess we're privy to and have access to be able to do that and help best advise clients.
Talk to us about some of the financial red flags somebody should be looking out for when they're looking at purchasing a practice.
So, I talk to a lot of associates all the time, and, an associate will really just kind of determine value based on the percentage of collections, which is good. It's a good high level indicator of value. But that's not the whole story, right? So, you know, I was preparing a deck for a seminar that I'm going to be involved in next week. And in there, I put, would you rather own a dental practice, $1 million dental practice with 20% EBITDA versus a $2 million dental practice that has 5%, right? I'll choose the $1 million practice all day. So, accounting is the language of business, and really being able to dissect those financials, the tax return, to really figure out what is profitability of the practice, right? Collections aren't everything. You know, being very careful with what maybe a broker says are certain add backs, right? And looking into those in detail. A broker is really going to tell you, here's what you stand to make out of the practice, right? Kind of a high level number, but it's really kind of figuring out, well, what goes into that number, taking it literally from soup to nuts, working from collections down to the costs of the true expenses of that practice. What are these add backs they're adding back in, right? All of these shareholder perks or non-operational expenses, right? Are there things in there that, you might need to replace? Is a spouse on payroll? Or is, our family members on payroll that are truly helping with the practice? Do they need to be factored into a projection, right? Maybe that's a separate cost that you're going to be incurring. And really just making sure, as a buyer, you're understanding what those numbers are, what true profitability of the practice is, what your debt service is going to look like. So you really level set the expectations, and there's tons of different, without getting into the details of different ways to value practices and really what to look for. But it's truly understanding the financials, the P&L of the practice. What are the add backs? So, so-and-so says, I'm going to take home X from the practice. Sure, you might, but let's really sit down. Let's evaluate that. Let's evaluate best case, worst case scenario. What percentage of those collections are fee for service? What percentage are insurance reimbursements? Are those insurance reimbursements, how much of that is maybe an older doctor that's getting Delta Premier based reimbursements, and, you have a younger associate that isn't eligible for Premier, and they're maybe going to be PPO. So factoring in a haircut right off the bat of revenue. How many new patients are they seeing, right? Looking at the practice management data as well, as opposed to just, the financial statements, right? What's the mix? Is the doctor doing the same type of dentistry? Are you going to be, as a buyer, are you doing the same type of dentistry, or is there additional dentistry that you're going to bring in? What's the opportunity? What's the upside of the practice? Number of operatories, how much production can you handle? Right. So all of these different questions to be asked as part of the buy side process, I think, is important. And getting to, understand what the client or the prospective client's goals are going to be, or where they want to be in, say, 3 to 5 years. Maybe they're going to buy a 4-op practice, and in 5 years, they're going to easily outgrow that space. And there's really no room for growth. And then they're kind of stuck, and maybe they bought a building, right? And now they need to move, or they signed a long-term lease, right? They signed a 10-year lease, as you guys, would help handle and figure out. But you're stuck to that lease and you're out of space, right? What are the options on a go-forward basis? And then really figuring out from a tax planning perspective when all those different milestones will be reached, and planning as best you can for the future is important. So I know I threw a lot at that, but there are a lot of things to be considered on that side.
I have a lot of questions. Sounds like you do too, Remy. I don't know who goes first. I'll start where one thing that I'm interested about in you describing some of this stuff is what kind of churn or what kind of turnover can you expect, or can a dentist expect when they buy when they buy a practice? I mean, how much are they like having to hustle right away because people are like, okay, my dentist is gone, I might want to look and finding somebody who I choose. or what is that a big concern for a lot of people who are buying a practice?
So I think it depends. I think it depends on how long the selling doc, if they stay on, right? Is it a hard cut transition with the selling doctor? Usually what we like to see, what we recommend is, at least the selling doctor stay on for, at least 90 days to help with that transition, help issue a patient letter. I think fit is really important. And I think, the practice brokers will talk a lot about that is making sure that the personality and of the buying doctor is similar to the selling doctor. So there really isn't a shakeup there. We like to bake in. I mean, it depends on the collection mix, but if we're talking, Delta Premier versus PPO, we'll conservatively haircut 20% of those collections. 10 to 15% of attrition, we like to budget, right? What's achieved. I think a lot of the times what you'll see is, you have a buying doctor who's obviously buying for a reason, right? And they have more of that entrepreneurial spirit and entrepreneurial mindset where they're going to take care of patient status, as best as possible, right? To get them through those recall cycles and basically affirm the transitionary period. And I think as long as the new patient count stays up for the practice, it's not really going to be problematic, right? And what we like to say, is we like to say, one new patient every month for every day a doctor works, right? So if you're working for the owner doctor or the buying doctor is working 4 days a week, then, we want to at a minimum see 16 new patients every month, right? If there's 2 associates in that practice working 4 days, we want to see 32 new patients per month. So I think that's a really good benchmark. But I mean, as far as attrition goes, unless there's an issue, patients are loyal. I think, I think that's something to be said about the selling doctor. And I know there's a lot of selling doctors out there that really do care. It's not about a specific dollar amount for them. It's about who really is going to be able to take care of their patient base, and essentially their legacy as best as they did. And so, I think that part is key to a good transition. Like, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, the second part of my question is how can you, I mean, certainly my question revolves around the culture within a practice. And certainly you can obviously look into the numbers, but there may be a good fit between the buying and selling doc. But what about the staff? Is there anything that you can glean from the numbers, or if not, how do you advise your client on how to handle some of the HR type of questions going forward?
Yeah, I think from the buying side, I think it's really talking with the selling doctor to really get a feel for where the staff stand, right? Who are some of the key people? What's their timeline, right? Are they looking to, either retire with selling doc or, get a feel for them, how long their tenure, how long have they been with the practice? How pivotal to the operations are they? But I think it's really as a buying doctor is really kind of sitting down with your staff, kind of promising them, if that's going to be the case. But I think it's just being, that things, aren't going to change, or if they are going to change, being upfront and being transparent about that, and what is essentially going to change. But I think it's really kind of planning for that through the due diligence process as best you can. If once the staff is known, I think talking to the selling doctor, who's likely to stay on, who's not, maybe who's good, who's not good, who's maybe problematic. And that's, you're never really going to know until you're into the door. Right. And sure, there might be a shakeup or two, in the beginning, but I think it's best really to take existing team along for a while, right? For at least a few months, to help with that, to help, I guess, lower the bumpiness of a transition, and that being really from the patient side, right? So the patient's kind of seeing familiar faces as they walk into a practice, and as they they get their services done. They're kind of seeing the same people, but I think at the same time, it's, kind of just assessing it for yourself.
All right. So data points, benchmarks, KPIs, and there's a lot of different ways we can ask for we want to know. So without giving away the farm, is there anything, what are some of those? And you can choose startup or an acquisition. What are some of the takeaways that everyone wants to understand?
So I think the biggest question, Remy, that I get all the time, at least for a new owner doctor, is, they've been to a ton of different seminars, whether that's midwinter and they get, thrown a lot of information out at them. I think the biggest question I get all the time is, what's my overhead, right? Like, what's my overhead? And they know, like, what a target overhead percentage is, and are they over, are they under? Overhead's very important, obviously, right? But I think, what is overhead in relation to what, and how are you calculating the overhead, right? Because certain people calculate it different. Sure. Some people include a reasonable comp for a doctor. Some people don't. The way that we like to look at, the P&L of a practice, you're going to have your collections, and then you're going to have your true cost of services. Those true costs of services, these are usually items that are fluctuating, usually with collections. So you have your drugs and supply costs, you have your lab costs, any associate wages that may be in there, any hygiene wages, any assistant wages. We're big advocates, right, of really bifurcating payroll and splitting out a P&L into the right categories to be able to assess and see where these overhead categories are broken out or are comprised of, essentially, right? And then each one having a target of where they should land from the perspective of a percentage of collections. So, you have your cost of services, and then you have, kind of those are your variables, more or less. And then splitting out your other sort of fixed overhead into 4 categories, your facilities and expense items, your practice development, your staff and employee costs, right? Back office, benefits, things like that. And then, a category of your admin, right? Your credit card fees, bank charges, office expenses, things like that, right? And that getting you to essentially your EBITDA number, right? So your EBITDA number, and then factoring that in. So your EBITDA number, as a percentage of collections. Well, what should that be? If I don't include a reasonable comp for a doctor, your overhead should be anywhere between 55 and say 60%, right? So, take home for an owner doctor, should be at least, not including a reasonable comp for them, anywhere between 40 and say 45% of collections, right? Then you factor in a reasonable comp for a doctor, right? To get to an actual EBITDA number, right? And that number is going to be truly reflective of what is the practice operationally going to generate in income if I were to have to pay an associate to run the practice, right? So what is that number? What is a good EBITDA for a GP practice? Anywhere between 17 and 25%, right? So we're looking at expense items in relation to collections. We're looking at the hygiene and doctor mix, percentage mix, 70% doctor, 30% hygiene, anywhere 25 to 30% hygiene, I think is a really good range. And then figuring out where those wages, where do hygiene wages fall in relation to hygiene production, total production, collection, right? So different KPIs and things like that. We have material that, we share with clients and prospective clients all the time to help with these things. But I think a lot of what's neglected outside of, P&L and tracking P&L is really looking at some of the practice management reports and really holding in on AR and what does your aging look like? And are you collecting on, the procedures that are being, right? So, in that we've seen a lot of times where that AR tends to get up there, right? And it's, maybe it's the front desk's job, maybe it's the office manager's job to make sure that they're on top of that, making sure that AR is turning over. It's turning over at an appropriate rate, depending on the specialty of the practice. right? So ortho's going to bill differently than a GP practice. So, making sure that some of those things are all just kind of monitored and in line. Does that answer that, Remy?
Yeah, no, and then some. Yeah, thank you.
It's really interesting because our clients, we share the same clients, but they come to us, and quite often they have significant student debt. They have potentially significant debt from acquiring a practice, or they're about to buy a building and then invest inside of that property, whether it's a purchase or a lease. And we're talking about these different buckets, and some of the buckets are not as easy to, you can't. Payroll, for example, it's a big expense, but it's one of the types of expenses that you can't really, you can't chop, because you want to hire and retain the best, and so inside of real estate, what we are trying to do is give our clients options, and so they understand, number one, understand the market, understand how their potential deal fits within the market, and there may be better spaces financially, but they may like a certain location, or a certain location may fit their demographics better. But ultimately, it's about educating them and helping them make the best decisions for themselves at their time. And so it's what I would like to point out is that inside of real estate, it's kind of nebulous, because there's all these open-ended, concepts and different types of layers of negotiations. And so it's a really complicated one to kind of dive into when likely as a younger dentist or mid-career dentist, you only do these types of renewals or these types of acquisitions maybe once, maybe twice, maybe 3 times in your career. And so they're complicated, and you gotta have a strong representation. And we really, I like having partners like you who really, can give more of a foundation than, let's say, a generalist CPA, because you really know what these guys need to go for, and it's really awesome to have that in a partner. So we appreciate you and what you do, because we're all experts, I guess, in our own domain. But we need to be a strong team to help our mutual clients, knock these projects out of the park. So
Really great, yeah.
Get to some fun stuff. All right. So yeah, go ahead.
When maybe you can walk us through actually how, a lot of times somebody who may be an associate, they're considering both options, potentially buying a practice or even starting up. How do you coach your clients through that process when they're investigating their option?
So this is practice purchase versus startup, or building purchase versus lease?
No, just an associate who is interested in doing their own thing, and they're investigating all their options. I mean, how do you help them make the best decision?
It's a good question. So I think ultimately it's, I think as an associate, and this is not meant to be taken the wrong way, but I think a lot of associates are ignorant to what truly is involved in a startup. Somebody, I think it's thrown out there as, startup versus practice acquisition. They're kind of synonymous, right? Which isn't really accurate, right? So I think it's really kind of just educating the associate as to, really what the differences are, and are they up for it, right? So I think there's certain culture fit for certain individuals who are looking to do a startup. And I think, that's one of many different factors that go into that decision, right? I think obviously geographical location is probably first and foremost, right? Are they going to do they want to do a startup in a very saturated geographical location versus maybe somewhere in a more, less urban area on the outskirts of a bigger city or a suburban city? That can go bode very, very well, right? So I think it's really kind of doing first, figuring out, okay, look, practice acquisition versus startup. There's obviously a massive cost differentiator. And then it's having the right plan of what you're going to do to be able to build the patient base startup. And do you have an alternative option where you can continue working simultaneously with that startup and continue to generate an income to be able to pay for the debt service until the practice gets up and running? Is there a separate fund that's easily and available to you to spend on marketing to get that startup location, to being able to generate income, right? So lots of different factors. I think it depends on the person and it depends on what they want to sort of kind of get themselves into one way or another. I think either way, the likelihood that a startup goes under is very slim for an associate. The likelihood that a practice acquisition goes under is even lower, right? And I think that's why lenders are more apt to lend to dentists, whether that's on the startup side or the practice purchase side. I think dentists have the second lowest default rate, second to mortuaries, right? So there's the access to cash is there and it's available and it's relatively easy to get. But I think it's just educating a client on, well, here's kind of the two different paths, cost, the amount of effort that I guess is needed one or the other. They're both obviously a big leg lift, but probably one more than another. And I think it's really just figuring out the client's appetite for them. Nick, Remy, I know you guys, we were working with a specific client who thought they wanted to do a startup. And, I think we kind of both knew that it wasn't going to be the right thing for that specific client. And I think it's kind of helping the client come to those realizations, right? Of, hey, this is what it's going to kind of look like. This is what it's going to be like. Here are the things that we need to consider. And, what do you think is best for you? And where do you want to go? Because, we can make both of them successful. It's just going to be obviously a different amount, for lack of a better way of putting it. But, I think it's just client education.
100%.
It always is, right? Regardless of what you're trying to understand. I mean, and certainly that's no different in our world. If you can't make an informed decision until you understand what your options are and what those decisions, are comprised of. So,
and I will say this, to any associate who's contemplating both, I think going down the route of both, I think, and exploring both, is a plausible option, right? To kind of see really what it's like and the different decisions that need to be made through the process, right?
That's fair. And we, again, it's really important for us that our clients or any prospects understand what all of their options are, because it's going to make more sense for some doctors to acquire, while others are better suited for a startup. And there are other factors, obviously, that influence those decisions. But generally, there's certainly two categories or two types. And so, we, to that end, we like to explore both in almost every situation. We often have doctors come to us saying, there's no way we're going to acquire, or there's no way we're going to start up. Let's look at acquisition options. And, we often take a pause, take a step back, and look to get somebody involved like you, Darin, so that we can really look at both options or all options comprehensively.
Yeah, there's no like one size fits all for everybody, because there's all these different considerations for each individual person. And some people want to, have that entrepreneurial kind of a vision, and they want to do their own thing and have it their way. Whereas if you're buying somebody else's practice, you're essentially absorbing their legacy, and there's the culture of that practice that you're inheriting. Down the road, you may relocate or do some you may have to accommodate the real estate concerns. We talked about that earlier, but that's I think that's one of the things that people like about the starting up is that they're getting this brand new gorgeous space that they feel proud of. It's like it's theirs, and that's kind of a neat feeling, and we certainly love helping our clients experience that. It's really rewarding.
I've seen some of your posts, and I mean, some of these new dental practices are just absolutely gorgeous with the build outs and the equipment. And I mean, amazing. I mean, truly, truly beautiful, truly amazing. I think, there's tax deductions for both. I'll say that, right? That's the CPA and me. But I think it's important, right? Going back to the point of having the right team and guys like you that can help, coach somebody, more towards, a startup. Where do we start? Where do we look? What's the demographics, the geographical location? What are the demographics? Where you want to be, right? I'm not going to be on that end of those conversations, right? I kind of have an idea of where I think a good practice would be, but not like you guys, right? And doing those market studies for those startups and having guys like you, as part of the professional team, I think is really important for somebody looking to do a startup. Having some guys that can coach you through, the real estate side, locations, and different factors that are involved in selecting the right location. If I'm advising a client on that, then I don't know.
Speaking of, I want to throw a total audible. Remy and I didn't speak about this beforehand, but it's come up quite a bit. Cost segregation analysis.
Yes.
I guess every situation is different, but you buy a building, you're investing tons and tons of money into it. A lot of times a dental build out will cost upwards of $200 a square foot, and that's just the walls and the plumbing and the HVAC, and that doesn't incorporate a lot of the FF&E or your equipment and technology. And so wanted to get your take, because ultimately any of our clients who maybe are buying a building and doing in this process, they're gonna want to speak to somebody like you specifically and say, hey, is this the right thing for me? What can you tell us about that?
Good question. I think if you're going to do a startup, for sure you should do a cost segregation, especially if you're owning the building, you're going to develop it, and the cost seg is crucial. You're talking easily well north of $1 million worth of build out. 100% cost segregation, especially now, and anybody that's doing this, in the near future with, the current bonus depreciation phase outs, just trying to really take advantage of that, depending on what's going to happen here with the elections. But the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act sets to expire at the end of 2025. So that bonus depreciation is phasing out. We're at, 60% currently. So, what does a cost segregation do? Cost segregation is basically going to allocate the purchase and the build out of the entity into more advantageous and more accelerated depreciation categories, right? And it's one thing where it allocates those into the right categories, but it's also a good leg to stand on if ever audited, right? So, if you go ahead and purchase a building, we're going to do an allocation of purchase price. Some of it land, some of it building, some of it, building improvements, land improvements, some of it furnitures, fixtures, and equipment. But to have, a build out like that and have a document that supports it is good, if ever audited. So startup, I would say yes, 100%, a cost segregation. If you were to go and just purchase a building, maybe as part of an acquisition or something, I think it just depends on current circumstances and purchase price, right? So, I think anything less than about $500,000, maybe 750, it may not be worth it to do a cost seg, but I think anything north of, a certain purchase price, say 500 or 750 or higher, it's probably more advantageous to do so. And I think it depends on the goals too. Is it a long-term hold? Is it a short-term hold, or really what the plans there are? But I think dollar amount versus what you're going to get. And I think a big part of that is, having a CPA or an advisor, whether it's dental CPA or, if you're going to go buy a building, but have us do the math and figure out what kind of depreciation and build out a tax projection for you. Hey, you're going to spend $5,000 on this cost seg. What is it going to save me from a tax perspective in years 1, 2, 3, 4, and kind of build it out? Is it worth it to spend that up front in the amount of what type of depreciation you're going to get, right? And that's ultimately what a cost seg does. Is it just pushes up your deductions, your allowable deductions into a shorter, more earlier period than spreading them out. And I think it depends on this unique circumstances of the client, right? Because the client may have other real estate. They maybe have an NOL, net operating loss that they're carrying forward. So it is, truly niche, it is client specific, but I think, to make it simple, I think if you're doing a startup, go ahead and go for it. And if the dollar amount on a purchase is larger than, say $750,000, then most likely it'll be worth it to do the cost, especially if you're looking for deductions up front.
To address a couple of those points, so most of our clients, the projects we work on, these are doctors, again, who are going to be buying and building one way or another, whether they're building from the ground up or buying an existing building and retrofitting it for a dental practice. But let's say they're staying in the building for the long term, right? This 10, 20 years. And they're certainly spending that at least that $750,000 that you referenced. That was a good explanation, and I think it was helpful to understand what cost seg is. But what's the bottom line in lay terms? What's the benefit financially? What's the benefit? What is someone going to gain from it?
So, the whole idea, so you're going to get a tax deduction for that. So, depending on the allocation of that purchase price, right? There's a different, there's a useful life allocated to those different pieces. That useful life is basically taking that cost over a certain period and allowing you to get a tax deduction for it. So you're taking that purchase price over a certain period of time or accelerating it. It is called depreciation. So for a building purchase, it's depreciation, and it's basically taken as an expense, on your business, to reduce your taxable income, essentially.
Is it fair to say it's going to provide some relief on the front end of an otherwise really expensive project, rather than benefiting from those returns over the course of the next 10, 15, 20 years? You're going to get a lump of money back on the front end of the project.
So I guess Remy, I want to clarify. So
Sure.
You're getting money back. It's not cash, right? But you're getting it in the form of a reduction, right? So whether that's a front loaded, NOL that you're creating to offset future income. So you're getting that cash in the form of you're not having to pay taxes.
Okay. Yep.
Right? Is that fair?
Yeah, that's important. That's an important distinction. Yes.
Yeah. So you're going to pay the money up front to do the cost seg, but the benefits there is just going to reduce your tax burden, at least front loaded in the beginning, right? And depending on, the projection of when you project to have income, either building up that NOL, which can be carried forward, to offset future income, right? So reducing your tax burden. So let's just say for very simple terms, depreciation, right? Say you made, $500,000 this year and you bought a practice and you have $100,000 worth of depreciation. That number is obviously factored in tons of different ways, but that 100,000 is going to offset that 500. So instead of paying taxes on the 500, you're paying taxes on the 400.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the way in which you achieve the benefit of a cost seg and of depreciation. Maybe in the first year you do a cost seg and that's 300,000 that first year. At 300,000, that takes that 500 down to 200,000, right? And why is that important? Because the more income that you're obviously going to generate, higher tax brackets you end up falling into. So the more income that you're generating, the deductions essentially offset that income play a bigger role.
Inside of a cost seg, are there two parts? I mean, like there's the actual building, but what about the facility build out? Is that, a lot of times somebody may acquire a building, but it's another 9 months down the road until that the actual construction is even complete? Would there be 2 cost segs, or is it just you would wait and do one?
You would wait. Yeah, you would wait until the build out is complete and do a full cost seg. And, you can go back and amend a previous return, or you can catch it up.
I jumped the gun before, but I think it's time for a couple of fun questions. So
Okay.
talk to us about the best compliment that you received for the work that you do. I'm sure there are many, but let's hear one.
We say this a lot of times, in, accounting or, being a CPA can almost be a thankless job because, there's a lot that we do behind the scenes that isn't really tangible for a client, right? Like, client's going to go and pay an attorney for some contracts. They buy a business, boom, it's there, right? Broker, you pay a broker fee, you have a practice, right? Like, for a CPA, it's ongoing, and a lot of what we do is done behind the scenes. And I think there isn't much of an appreciation for what it really takes to get the financials or get your tax return to what it essentially ends up being, right? Which a lot of people don't really care about. What's my number? What do I owe what do I owe the government? What do I owe? But, honestly, a lot of times I think the biggest compliment, that's a tough one, Remy. I think it's just hearing that clients love us and they love our firm and they like the people that work with us. And I think we really do try to do a good job with educating our clients, right? And helping them, navigate through some things that may be foreign to them, right? Whether that be teaching them how to read their financial statements or how to understand taxes. And it's just kind of hearing through the grapevine, getting a phone call saying, hey, I was referred to by so-and-so. They absolutely love you. And, they suggested that I need to go with you guys. So hearing that, I think has been awesome. I was talking with a prospective client the other day and they were debating us or somebody else. And I've been helping them through, practice purchase. And they're just like, well, I can't not go with Darin. I just can't not go with Darin. So, I think the biggest compliment we get is like my guys actually answer the phone. And my guys, respond to me when I need something or when I have a question. And, that's one thing that we really do pride ourselves on is, that client service aspect that's like so easily gone in a large firm or a larger firm or, a firm that has a bazillion clients. Like we really do we appreciate and really pride ourselves on the client relationship aspect and making sure that we're talking with clients, we're, referring, we're calling back and we're answering emails and, our clients are being attended to. And I think that's really kind of an intangible, Remy, that's kind of built up over time. And then hearing that come to fruition through the grapevine by, hearing clients refer us, without any sort of market.
We, for what it's worth, we hear that feedback about you and your team all the time. So it's really nice when we get that type of feedback about you because, oftentimes it's someone that we might have introduced or worked on with you. And so when you're describing this somewhat thankless role that you play, it reminds me of my mother-in-law. She's a veteran teacher of 40 years. And similarly, I don't know how much her students in the classroom appreciate what or understand the benefit that she provided for them, but they come back, 20 years later, 30 years later, and they walk into her classroom and, and hopefully that happens with you also. Maybe it's someone retiring or someone later in their career, and they come back and look back at what they've achieved and think, and they understand, acknowledge the role you played in it. So at least I hope that's the case.
No, it definitely is. And I don't say that, sometimes we feel that way, right? Because at the end of the day, a lot of people, it's all about the amount owed, right? And dentists make a lot of money, right? And so, hey, there's, we're doing everything that we can in our power to mitigate that. But I mean, it's the little things. I mean, it's, going to a client meeting or going to a client's dental practice, sitting down with them, they're exploring, selling a part of their practice to their associate or, whatever that is. And it's just always just the thanks again for everything. Right. And, we
Yeah,
feel like we're constantly on all the time with them. But it's sort of just the low hanging thank yous, or, even if a client is, doing a transition and they sell, or we're helping a client through the purchase process. Right. And it's like, thanks for getting me to this point. Right. Like, but it's, our involvement is constant with them. Right. So, at the purchase, congratulations. Now the real work starts. Right.
Right.
And now we're planning, and every year we're trying to figure out what to do to either save on taxes or how to grow the business. So, there's, I guess, a lot of small wins throughout, our tenure, our relationship with a client of ours.
Yeah, you guys are there for many, many memorable milestones, from the beginning all the way to the end. It sounds like we probably have to, we focus so much on this conversation about, acquiring an existing practice or potentially starting up. We could also probably talk for another hour about, exiting and what we could be thinking about. But, I guess in tying into what Remy was saying, is there any advice that you would give to your 20-year-old self about, and if you could, what would you tell your 20-year-old self?
My gosh.
You could go back in time.
I was a big rule follower, hence the accounting and hence that. And really kind of over assessing. Let's say that. I was more of a perfectionist growing up, rule follower. I'm the oldest sibling of 3, very type A. I think, we see this a lot with people who are looking at either startups or practice purchases. They kind of get cold feet, and they try to really analyze every piece there. There is a point at which, if I look at my 20-year-old self, just kind of like take a deep breath, relax. Everything's going to be okay. Things tend to figure themselves out, right? You have the right people, you have the right trusted advisors through the process. Have your go-to couple people that you truly trust their decisions. Talk with them, and then, you can't overanalyze everything. Sometimes you just have to kind of make a decision and roll with it. I look back at my 20-year-old self, I think that's really like what it would come down to, because I find myself sitting and vetting. I mean, anything, right? It applies to all aspects, whether it's business or college or, life, personal stuff. But, sometimes you just got to make a decision and roll. So I don't know. Is that a good answer?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm like the exact opposite. I went to engineering school, dropped out within a month, and went to art school, and then got a master's in fine art, and then became a real estate broker. And so I maybe I just dove in too quick and didn't and didn't contemplate as much. But you got to be well rounded. So it is, it takes all kinds, I guess. One thing that we like to we've tried to adopt is the last person who we interviewed, they ask a question that you get to answer, and then you get to ask a question that you'd like to be answered. But the last person who we interviewed, they asked, what do you foresee changing in the dental industry in the next 5 to 10 years from today? I don't, I know it's, you don't have a crystal ball, but do your best.
I don't have a crystal ball. I think rates are going to come down here. They already did. I mean, the Fed dropped rates 50 bips. It will probably continue to go down. That might increase the consolidation, side of things. But I honestly always think that there's going to be, there will always be a place for private practice dentistry. And, if any associate, I guess, who's considering startup or practice purchase, go do it. There's tons of different advantages for it. Don't make it complicated. You will be successful. But I think like there still is, with any service-based business, regardless of what's happening, in the industry, whether that's a consolidation, even for CPA firms, right? There's a lot of big PEs that are buying, CPA firms now. There will always be a place for private practice. And there's just one thing that you cannot take away, whether that's technology, whether that's AI, whether it's all these different buzzword things. And it's just good old fashioned customer service, patient service. Like that's just something and it's something that it's hard to teach. And if you can master that, treat people right, success will follow, money will follow the success.
That's great. That's a great answer. And then how about what question would you like our next guest to field?
Does it have to be dental specific?
No, but it would be helpful. We just depending on who will be on next.
Okay. Okay. Maybe just ask.
So yes.
What do they like working with dentists? Why do they like working with dentists? Or what do they like about working with dentists the most? Is that fair?
Yeah. Very fair.
What do they like about working with dentists the most?
We can absolutely do that and let you know what they say. Awesome, man.
Perfect.
We really appreciate having you. It's a lot of fun. Got a lot of good insight, and probably we'll be reaching back out to get some clarity on some of these answers and how we can benefit our clients and how we can coach them up on some of these things and hopefully refer them back to you. But we appreciate your time, and as always, thank you so much.
Pleasure, guys. Thanks for
Darren.
having me on, and it's always good doing stuff with you guys and seeing you guys around and working together. So thanks for
We love
having me.
working with you too.